I'll first of all just kind of briefly introduce our second session, the short one, by Alicia. Wow. Alicia and I, Moniz. Okay. Alicia Moniz is talking about, will be talking about how BIM will change her life. And I'm an advocate of BIM, even though I've never used it. I've studied it, and it is a cool thing. Our first session is the main session, and tonight we have Alan and Karl that are both from the Microsoft SQL Tools Team, okay? And talking about a new tool that is just been released to in preview, which is the SQL Operations Studio. Did I get that one right?
That's right. Yep.
Okay. And so
we didn't choose the name.
SOS.
Yeah. But just
If you need help, then you call it SOS.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that was our joke, is there's a SQL operating system, which is also owned by our team. So the same manager says all of our products from now on will be named SOS.
So, take it away.
Great. So yeah, I'm Karl Bertram. I'm the tech lead for the SQL Operations Studio project. And can you go to the next slide? And so this is Alan Yu. He's the PM for this. And so just our agenda here, I'll just kind of walk through. We're going to go over what is SQL Operations Studio. We're going to go over a demo. And then we'll talk about some of the new features coming up in SQL Operations Studio. So what works well for if you have any questions, just kind of jump in with those questions. We can be interactive, or I can just kind of talk, and that's also fine. So just whatever, just jump in anytime you want. So can you go to the next slide? So here's a slide. I'm not going to go over everything here, but I just want to give some context on kind of who we are and what does our team own and what are we doing. And so we're on the SQL Tools team, and some of the stuff we own is we own this tool, this new one called SQL Operations Studio. We also own SSMS, SQL Management Studio. We own SSDT, that's the Data Tools and Visual Studio. We have a Visual Code, a VS Code extension, so that's MS SQL for VS Code. We also have a bunch of command line tools that we're coming out with, like a scripter tool, a CLI tool that we just announced, SQL CMD, BCP. We also own different frameworks that you might be familiar with, like SMO or DAC effects. And these are things that are different object models that you can use from PowerShell and all those things. So basically, we're the team that does all the tooling for SQL Server. So that's kind of that. I won't go into all of these. This is more of a slide we use for management to present, hey, here's what all these different things do. So go to the next one. So I'm using a deck here that is someone else put it together, so I'll just kind of talk about it, and you can jump in anytime. Typically, we'll have our our lead PMs and our managers come up and do these presentations, and so right now they're all on vacation, so they send the engineering and the second string here. So you won't get a polished presentation, but I'm actually the tech lead who knows the details of the project, so you can get some details on how we put it together and that, but you won't get the marketing spiel as well. It's fully polished. Yeah, great. So it sounds good. All right, so we released this thing about a month ago now, a few weeks ago. And overall, you can see we got about 2,600 stars up on GitHub. That was actually really good. We were the #1 trending project on GitHub for a while there. So that was actually, it released. It got a lot of positive feedback. Has anybody here used the tool? Anybody? Yeah, a few of you? Great. So we'd be interested in getting your feedback, and hopefully you found it to be lightweight install. I know the number of files. A lot of people will say, hey, there's too many files. We're working on that. But overall, our metric there is about installation time. And so we say, hey, as long as you can install it reliably under 5 minutes, then that's kind of what we're really targeting for there. And obviously, shorter is better, but that's kind of our stake in the ground of acquisition time. But overall, it's a nice lightweight tool. We got a lot of positive feedback on GitHub. One of the things we're looking at is trying to move open source, so getting much more community engagement and moving away from the close behind the door, go away for a couple years and come out and say, here's your new features, to saying, here's a little bit of features that we're delivering incrementally, taking community feedback, integrating that in, doing monthly releases. And so it's just a new way of doing things. And overall, the community seems to be engaged and liking that, and that they can get. It's our effort to be much more transparent about what we're doing, much more responsive to customers' feedback. Can you go to the next one? So here's just some of the community engagement that has come out. So we have one of the keys with SQL Operations Studio is we want to be extensible from the get-go. So this is really, we're building a tools platform, and we want to have both the internal partners, our premier partners like Redgate or SQL Sentry or Idera one, and we want them to come in and add features to this tool. And also make it really easy for third-party, community people in general just to extend the product. So extensibility from day one is really a core a principle of what we're doing with this tool versus things like SSMS. And so you can see Redgate's already said, hey, we're interested. We're working with them actively. We don't have anything to announce, but they're engaged with us, and they're thinking about extending the tool. Just other people have come out and have built, this is an example of a widget someone had put together, or a blog that how to do a widgets in our dashboard. And so overall, people really like the extensibility story. So next slide, please. Cool. So what is SQL Operations Studio? So this is nice. This is the marketing stuff. I'm not exactly sure what Eric, who would normally present, would say here, but basically SQL Operations Studio is, it's kind of, we have different things here, right? So we have the core query editing and edit data, and that's your developer-focused scenarios. And we also want to do some of the traditional admin scenarios. So this is when you're in SSMS, in Object Explorer, you have SQL Agent and your backup restore and all these different dialogues and wizards that we kind of think of as admin-y stuff. And then there's this other user base, which I'll show some slides later, which is your IT pro and kind of more of the script-oriented DBA. And so we see this kind of continuum of personas of who uses the product, from your heavy developer who just has to use a database and they're writing code most of the time and doing schema modeling, over to your traditional DBA who might be administering a set of servers and really is using these wizards and doing that, to kind of some of the more modern workflows where you're doing more management at scale and you're looking at scripts and how to execute scripts across large estates of servers. And these different personas, even though it could be the same person in different roles. So we don't think of it as, here's Jan and here's Steve, and Jan does this and gives it to Steve or whatever. This is kind of the old way of engineering of these real fixed persona. We look at it more of like, these people have different tasks or responsibilities at any time. And to do that, they're going to need to do these types of activities. And so we look at kind of the workflows and try to design feature sets that work well to accomplish those goals. And that's, I think that's kind of what he's trying to accomplish or communicate with this slide. I'm not sure. I have some more details later on that. Next one. All right. So yeah, here's some of the keys of what SQL Ops Studio is it's extensible. I've already covered that. I have another slide about the extensibility. But the key of the extensibility is we're extensible on two different main levels, or actually three. One is the way we built the app is we have a front end, which is an Electron, cross-pat, kind of using web technology, a modern GUI app. And that communicates with our core logic tier, which is a C# app built on .NET Core. And the way these communicate is over this protocol we defined, that's a JSON RPC protocol, which we call the Data Management Protocol, DMP. And what the DMP is doing is it's abstracting away, here's how you communicate about doing data management versus here's how you present how you do it. So what we are able to do is take different clients. So we have MS Scripter, we have this CLI tool, and then we have Carbon was the code name, but SQL Ops Studio. And those all are using the DMP layer to communicate with one common host, one common service. That's how we do all the data management. And the idea here is you could take different kind of data providers, and you could plug them in. As long as they communicate with the same protocol, then we have extensibility around supporting different types of data sources. So you can imagine like Cosmos DB, we could plug into the same tool. And by that same logic is you could take the SQL tool service and you can use it in different clients. So you can think of, people don't see it when you download Operations Studio, but the SQL tool service is really the core of the platform of how we do data management. And what we're really doing here is we're taking a bunch of the implementation from SSMS, we're moving it into the SQL tool service, it's all under MIT, open sourcing it, and then we're refactoring up into a nice clean JSON RPC API. So this is actually a really interesting, should be interesting for people who want to build data management tooling for SQL Server, because you're getting all this logic that's in SSMS, it's being cleaned up, refactored, modernized, put into an open source GitHub repo. You can free to take it with MIT and use it wherever you want. So it's, that's one of the extensibility ways. The other one is just in the product itself, we want to have a extension marketplace and allow UI extensibility right in the SQL Operations Studio. So those are that's that. It's free and it's available cross-plat. So that's this slide. Next one. Okay. So let's see. Yeah, so basically what we're focusing on now is we have, we're not going off for 3 years and building a whole tool set and saying, here you go, right? We're delivering a certain set of features. Sorry, getting a little sniffles, but we're delivering a certain set of features, which is your core data management feature. So we think of this as connection, object explorer, so schema browsing, query execution, data editing, and that's kind of like what we say, hey, this is like the core, base of what like everybody needs these features. Then you start getting into the admin stuff, which we'll start getting into SQL agent, backup restore, and all those types of things, right? So that's kind of what we're focusing on now. The main focus for the next several months that I'll be focusing on is building out this extensibility API platform. And then, yeah, I think this third one, I'm not sure, yeah, just it's still going with the extensibility. So any questions so far on kind of what I'm covering? Yeah?
Well, my question's kind of a why.
Okay.
What's the point of difference? Why do this rather than SMS?
That's our number one question that we get. So it's why are you doing this? And there's lots of reasons why, or there's a few reasons why. One is, of course, we need to support cross-plat. So we have a lot of developers who use Mac. And so those developers is a new market we need to grow into. So that's a big one. The other one is SSMS has a very specific perspective on how you manage a database, right? So SSMS you can think of as a giant wrapper around every switch in T-SQL. So the way you can, the scripting language for SQL Server is T-SQL, and everything you do there, you write T-SQL and has all these options. If you were to take all those options and build a dialog box for all of them, that's SSMS, right? So there's kind of a one-to-one mapping between every feature switch in T-SQL and all the UI controls in SSMS. So that we really aren't going to change, right? That's the identity of SSMS. And we'll keep moving that forward, but we're not going to radically alter what SSMS is. We're going to keep maintaining it, bring it forward. It's supported. It's not going away. There's a team enhancing it. But its kind of perspective on how you work is not changing. So when you want to do things radically different, we need a new tool, a new platform to do that. And so one of the main things we're looking at is this IT Pro script-based management. And it's how do you manage at scale? How do you allow users to create scripts? How do you allow them to organize their scripts with built-in source control and workspace management? And how do you allow them to take these scripts, PowerShell scripts and T-SQL scripts, and well, one, we want to help you generate them and then execute them at scale. So we have, that's one of the examples. The other one is the extensibility story. So we have kind of a different perspective on how should a modern DBA, or how do modern DBAs and IT pros want to manage large SQL Server estates. And those radically different workflows that we kind of want to build over time, these are things that we, these are things we will not probably radically alter SSMS to do. So it's just kind of, it gives us a blank canvas to go after new things is another reason. Sorry?
It just seemed like, I mean, I always have been a fan of central management server,
Yep.
SSMS, and it's like an extension. I mean, that gives you like a little tiny scope, and this is like a big scope. Because I was playing with it today, and I was able to just easily connect to an Azure database that I just set up recently, and it was nice and off studio.
Oh, great, yeah.
I mean, it just worked, which is, I mean, that's, go off on a little bit of a tangent. I have a friend who's a very skilled developer, and I gave him the Metro document that Microsoft, and he read through it, and he said if only all the developers were to do 10% of the stuff that Microsoft stated in that Metro design document, the world would be a much better place. And it's just kind of like how Microsoft's products are actually, they just work now.
Yeah.
And that's what I liked about the Ops Studio, is it just worked.
Yeah, exactly. Things like Xcopy deployment is a big ask we get. Hey, I'd love to throw my admin tools on a USB stick, plug it in somewhere, and just run them, right? That's never going to happen with SSMS because of the technologies we use. Things like CMS, that's definitely something we'd want to put in Ops Studio. But even there, we're looking at like going beyond that and saying, hey, we want to take server groups, and that's something I might get to later, and make these server groups a first-class management concept. So being able to say, oh, instead of creating a SQL agent job on one server, what could you do if you could take a SQL agent job and scale it out across a server group and have that automatically created? Definitely like multi-server query execution and thinking of things, sorry, one second, like test environment and dev environments and doing data migrations. These are types of things where we want to take that server group concept similar to SSMS and just make it a first-class management concept. And so when you're thinking of like SSMS, it's really, there's too much expectation around what it does to really go in there and say, oh, we're going to refactor all these ideas. We'll get as much negative pushback on those changes as we would with positive feedback on the changes. Sorry?
You made mention of a built-in source control. Could you expand on that?
Yeah, so if you look at Operations Studio, one of the things that we really went after with it, because we had a lot of discussions when I was proposing this project and when we started doing it, was should we do Operations Studio as just a blank application, which would be built on, say, Electron with no editor and just kind of make it a connection management thing that launch other apps, or should the editor be built into this tool? This was a big conversation point we had. So some people were saying, hey, we should do a connection hub and then have all the tools launch from there. And other people like me were saying, no, we need an editor built into this project, right? Excuse me. And so I pushed really hard to say we need an editor, and that was where we made this pivot point of, well, if we need an editor, we can't build an editor, right? So for example, I spent 7 years working on Visual Studio, and I know that on Visual Studio, we had about 10 people doing editor, and they did that for about 2 or 3 years, and it's a big thing because you're talking about language service and file management and all this other stuff, right? So what I said is, look, there's no way we're going to go build an editor. We're not the editor team, we're the SQL Tools team, right? So so that's where we forked VS Code, and when we forked VS Code, but for various reasons we couldn't get them to accept all the changes we needed to do all the UI extensibility, so we ended up having to fork that code base. And when we did that, one of the things we brought over from VS Code is it has integrated source control. So they have a workspace management, so you can open workspace files, you can open folders, and these can be Git repos or TFS is an option. And so what we're thinking is in modern workflows, the DBAs will have libraries of scripts, and those scripts are going to want to share across their team, and just really facilitating how can you share these things, these script libraries, either PowerShell or T-SQL or Bash is another one we care about. And how do you share them across teams? How can we allow and automate creation of these scripts? And then what facilities can we do to scale out the execution of these? So those are some of the more forward-looking things we're looking at. But at least today we do have manage the scripts and check them into source control. So there's a really nice support inside of Ops Studio for doing like diffing, doing change tracking. So if you go in there, you check and you create a Git repo, you change the file, it'll tell you here's all the files you've edited. You can diff them, push, create branches, all that stuff right in the tool.
Just TFS or Git?
Git is the one built in, and so TFS is an extension. So once we enable the extension marketplace, you'll be able to put the TFS in. But right now, it's just Git is the only thing that it supports. So anything else? Cool. Okay, next one. Okay, so yeah, these are kind of some of the core things, and I think this will get into your demo. So these are some of the core features that we have here. Just you can connect to SQL Server, you can manage the connections, you can put them into groups, you can browse the schemas in Object Explorer. There's an editor with language services, IntelliSense, tooltip hover, syntax errors, query execution, and I think that's the main things you'll show. Some of the other stuff we'll show is the dashboarding stuff, where we have one of the main things we wanted to do is have a central place where you can view status of servers and databases. And I'll get into later some of the thoughts we have about how we want to extend this dashboard idea to like a command center idea. And this will be like your key place to do admin type activities. So it's kind of like, well, you have an SSMS if you think about it. Is SSMS, we call it Object Explorer, but it's not really an Object Explorer. It's here's all your objects, oh, and then here's all these management tasks. And so all the management tasks we just shoved in there into the Object Explorer. And then you have this problem of the cascading right-click menus, context menus. So you'll say, oh, here's all your objects, here's all your management tasks. You right-click, and then you can go on through 2 or 3 levels of tasks. And people, it's kind of like, guess what the commands do. I think the joke we always have is, what's the difference between extract data and export data or something? You know, there's one creates a DAC pack and one launches SSIS or something, but no one knows which is which. It's kind of, or one's a backpack, one's a DAC pack. I don't even remember. But anyway, there's all these different commands, and it's a mess. So what we're saying is Object Explorer and SQL Operations Studio is all about objects. You know, database schema objects. And we're going to optimize around servers, databases, database objects, server groups, and all of the admin tasks move into the command center. And so that's something we have proposals for, but that's what we're building up. So I'll kind of show you what some of the mock-ups later. So with that, you want to do a demo?
Yep, sounds good.
Great.
All right, thanks, Carl. So I'm going to be showing like a bunch of features of SQL Operations Studio, but I'll be using a scenario so that we can at least have some kind of I guess, story behind all the features of SQL Ops Studio. So first, I'm going to pull out a customer issue. And here we have our friend Eric, who says there are order details missing in the wide world importers database, something that's pretty well known. And there have customers that reported orders have been placed in this database that they have not been delivered. And based on initial investigation, order details information from the order system is not inserted into the wide world importers order database. So we're going to go take a look into this using SQL Operations Studio. And here we go. We're in SQL Operations Studio, and this is a very familiar Object Explorer. And notice that we're currently using dark mode, which seems to be a very popular customer ask in SSMS. And you can actually go change that in the color theme. And there's a bunch of other colors if you like red or any of those other colors there. But for the
so even though it seems trivial, that's actually our #1 requested feature.
Right. So currently I'm running SQL Server 2017 on a Docker container, and I have my demo script right over here. So I'm going to be running SQL Server by using this Docker command. And currently there's a little thing here that I have a shortcut to basically select text and then execute it in our integrated command line terminal. So we could actually run command line inside of SQL Operations Studio. And just to show you how to quickly make keyboard shortcuts, I'll go over here. And then you could do selected text, I believe. Run selected text in active terminal. And here, you notice I currently have it binded to F6, and you could totally customize all of your keyboard shortcuts through here. So currently I have it set to F6. So I'll be using this when I run these commands. So let me close this. Running SQL Server. And then we have to wait for SQL Server to finish the initial bootstrapping. So we're doing a quick little sleep command. It's not too interesting, but OK, good. We'll clear it just to make it a little bit easier to read. And now we're going to run this test script, which is basically checking to see if there's any failures in the database. And basically, you know, we had the customer issue submitted, so we want to see if there's actually an error. And we're just waiting for it to run. And look, oh, F. So that means there was a failure. Let me just run this one more time, actually. OK, so there's a little bit of a problem in the test script, but this works now. So we look at here, and we see a failure that website.insert customer orders fails for invalid order lines. And typically, when you see when like a developer sees this kind of database, they have no information on like how the database is laid out or any of that. So it would be helpful for a developer to figure out like where exactly this table is, and to also just see the different schemas right away, so they could go and make a change in the database. So this is my server here. And currently, this is the wide world importers here. And what's nice about SQL Operations Studio is that we have this manage option. Another thing to note is that what you're maybe used to in SQL Server Management Studio is that when you right-click here, there's just a ton of options and right-click on there. And we kind of want to remove that. So most of at least in the base copy, we just want to make it very straightforward about what actions you can do. And then from extensions afterwards, you could add additional options.
Yeah, just kind of add in here. This is kind of one of our big design discussions that we have is like how many items should we put inside the context menus. And so right now we're trying to say like it should be. So yeah, no more than 3 or 7. And so what, can you just right click here again on AM? So what we're thinking, I just see if anybody has any feedback. So what we're thinking here is if you get over, say, 5 of these, we add a new item at the bottom here that says more. Then when you click on more, we have this, which hasn't gone to yet, we have this idea of these dialogues can fly in. And so we'll have a dialog come in here with all the available tasks with tiles, and then you would choose the one. So it's really just trying to keep these simple. And then in the fly-in, you might have like a search that said, you know, search for the command and making kind of optimizing around keyboard navigation there. So I don't know if that's just food for thought. Yeah.
That sounds great if you can control which of the 3 show up initially, the ones that you want to show up.
That's actually really good feedback. Yeah, is that maybe we'd have user settings of. I mean, yeah. So let's we'll take that feedback. Yeah. Uh-huh.
They're going to want to do 2 different tasks, and someone's always going to complain.
Yeah.
Is it on top?
Yeah, for that one, we had another one. Ken, who's the engineering manager, has this idea of these perspectives. I don't know if anybody's used Eclipse, but Eclipse has this concept of perspectives, where it's basically you can go to some menu and say, oh, I want to do debugging, and then the UI changes around. Oh, I want to do C++ development, and you get different options. So we could think of this idea of I'm doing development versus I'm doing admin, and then kind of customize the layouts or defaults. But definitely I'll take that into our design reviews.
All right. So now we'll go click Manage so that we could see the health of our database, our wide world importers here. And what's nice here is that you could automatically search for this table that has a problem. And we know the one that says Insert Customer Orders. So if you're someone that's not very familiar with the database, it may take you some time to look around. But here you could simply search for Insert Customer Orders, and there we go. We have Insert Customer Orders here. And what you can also search for is things specific like stored procedures, or views, etc. So it helps you find the information you need.
And in the December release, which is coming out on the 19th, the dashboard will have a scroll bar, so you can see that too. As you should be able to scroll down here. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Anyway.
So we know there's a. Oh.
Yeah, exactly. So wait a few more days and you'll have that.
Yes. So yeah, there's a problem with insert customer orders here. And this is actually also, like in the current build, there's only script as create, but in the next build, it'll be a script as alter.
Oh, it looks like you have it here. Oh yeah, you do
Yeah,
have the scroll
yeah.
bar now. Okay, you
Yep.
just hadn't hovered, yeah. So
Yep.
right now there's some scrolling issues and script as alter's not there. So he's using our
daily
build
build.
for master, yeah.
Yep.
Oh, and that's the other note to make is right now we have, sorry to keep interrupting your demo,
No,
but we
it's
have
perfectly
a repo up on GitHub called SQL Ops Studio where we take we took a snapshot of our source code for the November release and we just put it up there, but all the engineering is still happening on another GitHub repo, and this was due to some legal logistics that we're going through. But with the December release, we're going to move over all the engineering to the public repo, so that way you'll be able to go in there and grab the daily builds and build it yourself just like we do.
All right, so I'm going to do script as alter on this table. And then it's automatically generated here. And we're just going to keep looking around. And it turns out that let's say that we looked into this and that the problem was somewhere in this statement here. So in this warehouse stock item. So as for me, I have no idea how wide world importers, like the whole schema looks like here. And I don't know what exactly warehouse.stock items looks like. So if I want to know like what possible columns could be affected here, I want to kind of inspect it. So I actually first have to connect to wide world importers. It's almost like use wide world importers, which is probably what you're used to in T-SQL. So let me quickly choose it from my recent history since I recently connected there and connect to it. And now what that allows me to do now that I'm connected to the wide world importers database is that I could hover over here and I could right click on it. I could either go to definition or I could look at peak definition. So by going to peak definition, this allows me to look at the schema of the table of stock items here so that I can easily make changes without having to go to a different window. So this allows developers to quickly understand like how tables are laid out. So it looks like here that we're trying to look for stock items. And that's the problem here. So let's go back to our managed dashboard here and go to stock items and see what the issue is. So we'll go to here and select top 1,000. And we have our query here that selects the top 1,000 stock item IDs. And it turns out that the problem is there's a stock item ID where it's currently set to 500. And it shouldn't be accepting that. So when I run this query, it should not show up for any result here. And what we know is that there's a fix for this. So we could go back to our stored procedure and make this fix. So it's a little bit of work that I already did before. But if there's a code snippet that you typically use very often, you can actually store that code snippet. So in this case, we have one called wide world imports code fix snippet, which is very aptly named to fix this database. But if you click tab on here, it will generate the code. And it seems kind of magical right here, but it's actually not that complicated. So if we go to the command palette here and go to code snippet, view or open code snippet. Yeah, open user snippets. And we're obviously using T-SQL, so let's search for SQL. And there we go. This is a code snippet that I was using before. So you could store these code snippets just in this format here, and then you could have IntelliSense essentially to just quickly generate this T-SQL inside of your stored procedure.
Can you manage where the snippets are stored?
Like
on a shared drive or something?
You could do like
Yeah,
workspace settings, right?
I'm not sure. I'll have to look into if you can just store them arbitrarily. Though what we do have is the extensions can provide snippets. So like for team scenarios, we're really thinking about extensibility in that case. So say you want to share snippets with everybody on your team, you could create a extension and then you could just give it to them and they'd install all your snippets. But in terms of sharing them, like you want to share the edits, yeah, we'll have to look into if you can.
Cool. So this is the wide world importers code fix snippet, and this should work, but you know how demos usually go. So let's try to run this really quick. And looks like it's executing, and it completed successfully. So let's go back to our test scenario here. So hopefully that code snippet fixed our problem that the customer had, but let's see if it works. Okay, it didn't work. Okay. Okay, so I'll have to look into that later. But basically, the whole point is to show you these different features that you could use to help manage your database. I have one more that I can show, just really quick, if we have time.
It may have, your code snippet wasn't inserting a missing record, it was raising an error. So it may have actually failed successfully on your run code here based on the T-SQL you added.
Is that what it's doing?
That might be it, actually.
Yeah.
I need to double check.
I think we're running through demos other people prepared.
Yeah.
So I think more than the detail of that, I think is just looking at the features that he's demoing and whatnot. But yeah, you can troubleshoot if you want. But
Right.
yeah.
So you talked about like integrating with source control.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I've seen and experienced is sometimes when you script something from the database,
Uh-huh.
then a change is made, but that doesn't necessarily get updated, and then you get things out of sync.
Yep.
Somebody goes to the source control, but it's not the latest version. So
Yeah.
trying to change the latest version. Would there be a way somehow to like when you're scripting something, to somehow say go to source control to prefer to go to there first or something? If you're trying to do that versus.
So I think what you're.
I wonder if there's a way to.
No, we don't have anything right now for that. But what are you familiar with, like SQL Proj support in Visual Studio? So all the if you're in Visual Studio, there's this feature where you can create a SQL project, and then you can reverse engineer database schema into a project. That's using DACFX, which is our library that basically is this model-based approach that will let you reverse engineer a live database schema or a schema stored in file, and then you can do all these like schema compare feature or DAC pack deployment. And probably that would be the technology we would look at to try to say, hey, you've reverse engineered your schema. So it probably wouldn't be just one, we might be able to build it into the script as create here, but it'd be more like you've reverse engineered a whole schema into source control, and then that you would be using kind of this DAC effects technology to do diffs, and could say, oh, you see drift between what you have in source control and what's in your live DB. Do you want to do schema compare and deploy? So these are things that are on our roadmap, but it's so we have a engineer, the owner of DAC Effects, just finished the initial port of DAC Effects to .NET Core. So that's kind of the first step in enabling those scenarios. And so you maybe probably it would be in like 6 months or something is about how long it would take to really get that type of technology integrated in. So it's not coming immediately, but in the fullness of time, we'd expect to see a lot more of, hey, I have different environments, whether it's schema and source control or a test and dev and staging environment, and I just want to migrate schema changes between these environments. So it's definitely stuff we're looking at. Yeah. Cool. Yep.
What I think is a simple thing. Over the years, I've seen a lot of trainers and presenters talk about Management Studio, and the fact that when a new object is added to your schema, to your server, and Object Explorer doesn't auto-refresh. You have to
Okay.
right-click
Yep.
and choose
Yep.
refresh. And the comment over many years has been, well, SSMS is an old tool and it's dumb, and it can't
Well.
auto-refresh. That's more of a perception problem.
Uh-huh.
And I noticed that this tool behaves the same way.
Yeah, we're.
Database, for example.
So we're reusing a lot of the same technologies that we have because our team is, we don't have an army. We have about 8 people doing all of the cross-plat tools, so we can't rebuild the whole technology stack ground up. So one of the ways we're accelerating our the way that we can get to market is we're trying to repurpose a lot of the code we have. So the nice side is we can bring you new tools quicker, we can modernize that tool set, but the downside is we're bringing over a lot of the bugs and things people don't like from SSMS, like this. So what we do have is we hit this a lot with IntelliSense. So if you go into IntelliSense and you say create table, and then you come down to your next statement, and you say select star from that table, then it says, oh, invalid object, you don't have this table. And so this is problem we did a little bit in SSDT. We call it drift detection. And so what it does is it has 2 connections. And then you have one connection that's being used to do the metadata, which is what we use for IntelliSense. And then you have another connection that's running that polls periodically that say, has the database changed since the last time I refreshed my IntelliSense cache? And then if it says, oh, you've added schema objects, it will repopulate the cache. And so there's a little bit of delay in the drift detection. And so yeah, you could imagine we could bring that type of technology across all the features. Like, oh, we could say, oh, we detected drift, let's go refresh. And definitely things like restore in the product is a different story because the tool knows, hey, I just restored. It should send the refresh. So that doesn't require any magic. It's more of the user next to you creates a database. Does it just show up here automatically? And then that's where drift detection is really interesting. But yeah, certainly those log them as issues. So that's the great about our new model is we have a GitHub GitHub repository. We're going to put all of our engineering backlog right in GitHub. So all of the stuff we're using to drive our sprints, that same, I think I'm on mute. No, I'm here. Okay, that same list of issues will be the customers will put their stuff there. We'll have our stuff there, and we just commingle them. So come in there. Create the issue, you can ping it and say, hey, when are you guys going to fix it and whatnot, and you'll see how we're scheduling things. But definitely, like if restore doesn't update OE, I'd call that a bug. Yeah. So great. Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
Okay, I'll try to do this relatively quickly, but I'll be showing off our Insight widgets and how they are actually created on our dashboard. Okay, so let's connect, go to Wide World Importers, and Manage. So this is different from what you were looking at before. We have 3 custom widgets on our dashboard in order to monitor the health of your database on Wide World Importers. We have the slowest query, active connections, and table spaces. So you might be wondering, like, how are these widgets created and how can I customize them for my own scenarios? So these are simply just T-SQL queries. So this is the T-SQL that powers the table spaces widget. And in order to, so first you have to run this query, and you actually should save this query to something that you can store inside of your user settings. And what's nice is that after you run the results for this query, you have several options here. You could save as CSV, save as JSON, and save as Excel. So if you need to simply put this data as like Excel sheet or JSON format, then you can just click this button, and you have the option to save as an Excel.
How difficult would it be to add 1,000 separators for large values?
So because you're saying like commas and whatnot.
Yeah.
I think it's a great option. So we should take that. Just to open an issue. That one we'll tag as a suggestion. And so, in terms of how difficult it would be pretty easy. But the bigger thing we see there is this is a new product. But with SSMS, we had one where, for example, the comma, we were using commas, and everybody in Europe's like, no, you need to use the period or whatnot. And so we went back all the way through the stack and found, no, this is a decision .NET Core had made that even though you say localize it for Europe, it's it still used commas for a certain data type, whether you're using numeric versus integer or something like that. And the feedback we got was, people have built scripts around these types of features, and when we make any change, even if it's to improve something, it breaks somebody somewhere. So really, would be a great optional setting to say, do you want that or not? Yeah.
We're managing databases that have hundreds of billions of rows in
Yeah.
them now, and it's very difficult to eyeball a number and figure out what my row count really is.
Okay, so if you're talking about this type of stuff, yeah, here we can definitely do it. If it's
Right.
these,
the
yeah.
metadata is much less of an issue.
Yeah, exactly.
Everybody in the room knows what I'm talking about.
Yep,
when
yep.
we're talking about spotting row counts.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, definitely open a suggestion that it's, in terms of difficulty, it should be pretty simple. Yeah, go.
And there's also a fourth option here where you can for your data and how you want it to be presented in the widget. So you could choose things like time series, which isn't that useful information. You could do like pi. It's kind of fancy, but let's go back to horizontal bar. Yep, that's the one. And if you're happy with what the widget you want it to look at like, you just will simply click Create Insight. But if you also want to save as a PNG and put it on a website or something, then you can make that an option as well. But if we click Create Insight here, we automatically get this kind of format that we could easily just copy over. So why it was important to save this query earlier is that that's where you will define that same query. That's how it finds, that's how the widget is exactly powered. It takes that SQL file. And if we copy this, we could save this in our settings. So we just go here and click on settings. And what's nice here is that you have your own user settings that you could use for your own workspace. But if, let's say you want to share settings across a group, and for example, I forked this code, or I cloned this from Eric's repo. So if we go to workspace setting, that's why when I opened this folder, I automatically had all those widgets show up. So if you just copied over the insight from here into here, that's how you get the query store, slow query active connections, and the table space one, which is the one that we are currently looking at. So if you just copied it over here, then you can store your widgets here and add as many as you would like to keep track of. And right now, like, it's still not like the best user experience. Like, we're still looking for ways to make this a little bit easier instead of just copying over like text. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that really starts getting into the extensibility story where we want people to be able to create widget libraries as extensions, put those up on the marketplace, be able to come in here and say, you know, which widgets do I want on which type of context, so like for servers versus database, and have a much more visual experience around it. But this is also one of the areas where we said, let's do enough where people can use it, and maybe they're working a lot in JSON initially, and then we'll collect feedback and then iterate on that. So rather than trying to go out and, you know, and predict what we think people want to do, let's see what people are doing, let's see the feedback we get, and then improve from there. Yeah. So is there anything else you wanted to show?
That's it.
Cool. So I think we have a few more minutes left. So what I'll do is there any questions on any of that before I go into kind of what we're doing next and everything? Okay, great.
Did you mention federated queries earlier, the multi-server?
Yeah,
like M or
so this is something we want to do. It's not something we currently do. And so what it will be is
it's not trivial.
Yeah, exactly. Like when having these server groups and then being able to execute a query and aggregate the results and everything. And so in SSMS, that aggregation happens on the client, so we'll have to bring all that in. And luckily, we'll port that code over probably, hopefully, and get that working. But that's on our. That's actually what I'll kind of start getting into now. But that's on our server group plan. Great. Next page. So yeah, so I won't go over too much detail here, but the key here is we want to be community driven. So as I mentioned a couple of times, use the product, give us issues. That's the way we're going to do our engineering. We have kind of two tracks of how we do things. One are we come up with our ideas and then we go out and do those. And then the other way is this customer focused engineering where we take our issues and that's from the user community and we merge those two together. So the fortunately right now they're overlapping pretty well. We put the tool out and it was like, where's SQL Agent? Where's Exit Profiler? Where is, whatever, CMS, all these types of things. And so all the stuff that internally we're saying, oh, well, we want these things. And then, of course, the users grabbed it and immediately also suggest that we do it. But there's a whole bunch of other stuff that users now are still coming in and telling us they want to do. Did you have a question? Or? Sorry.
Well, we actually have scratched my head, but I did have a question. It's in your team's group, I mean, your skills, and so the new CLI tool that I just saw pop up on.
Absolutely. Yeah, he's the he's the one that posts that blog.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you speak about, all I got from just is that it's improved version of SQL commands.
Yeah, do you want to go ahead and do a little bit on that?
Oh yeah, so there's a new command line tool for those of you that are managing your SQL Server databases right now called MS SQL CLI, and it was public previewed yesterday actually. And basically, in terms of all your interactive scenarios, you should be using MS SQL CLI because there's features such as auto-completion, syntax highlighting, and just it's also under a BSD3 license, so it's very similar to MIT license. So we're constantly trying to find new features in order to improve the interactive experience. So in terms of automated scenarios, you can still continue to use SQL CMD
That
because
was my first question.
Right.
Yeah, should I use it for scripting or what?
so right now, in terms of performance, we're not quite we're not way faster or lighter than SQL CMD currently. But in terms of interactive scenarios, like where you're having to go into command line and trying to look up things, and then you have IntelliSense built in, that's where you would use MS SQL CLI. Eventually, you want to get to the point where we're also matching SQL CMD in terms of performance, but not there yet.
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, it's also for this concept of the tool of last resort. We get a lot of people who want to put SSMS on their production database servers, and we generally tell people, it's a supported thing, but I wouldn't personally recommend it just because it's bringing in a whole bunch of Visual Studio and all this other stuff. And we usually tell them, install in a jump box, and if you want to put stuff on your production server, do command line tools. And so this is another place where that would be really nice, is you just install it there. For some reason your network's down, you got to restore the server, you jump in, you have a nice interactive environment. If you're on the jump box, you might as well use SSMS or SQL Operations Studio. So, okay, next slide. So yeah, I think this is just more of the same in terms of go to GitHub, open theirs. We're using these milestones, and that's how you can see the stuff we've said we're going to do at a certain time. And we use these tags, these labels, pretty pretty extensively across the issues, and that's a good way to see where things are being triaged, when they're going to be fixed, how they're being processed through the issue, the way we handle and schedule issues. Next one. So real quick, I won't go into too much detail because we're starting to get into the lower level stuff here. But this is kind of the way, this is a slide I put together a few days ago of how I will propose features to my management, how I try to get things into the backlog into this tool. So I'll say something like we think there's different types of users, or different personas. Maybe it's the same user, but they're in different modes. So they might be developers, DBAs, IT pros. These are the three large user communities that we think we would like to use this tool. And here's some of the different features that we think these people may want to use to complete their job. Now, this group of, we call them developer scenarios, but these are really DBA scenarios. You can think of all of these things also being here, because those are really your common things. Maybe the IT pros don't need as much of these, but there's really these people fall into, they have different tools available from Microsoft today. So our developers, we think, want to use Visual Studio with SSDT. They generally are fairly happy with that. They also have VS Code. There's a whole bunch of these guys who are non-Windows developers. We have a lot of users on SSMS. There's a fairly large community there. And then on the IT Pro, this is really a group we haven't done a lot to really support that well. So we get a lot of feedback. Hey, what's going on with PowerShell? When are you going to give us more commandlets? What's happening? Why don't you make it easier to do what we need to do there? So the types of things for these guys is we want to put, like, you bring in CMD mode into that command terminal. We want to have the PowerShell module and SMO loaded into the integrated terminal right away. Maybe we'll think of things like remote command execution to let people take PowerShell scripts and kind of scale them out. So that's those guys. For developers, the next things we'd be thinking about there is like Profiler, Import, Export, the SQL Proj with Schema Compare and all that type of stuff. Table Designer, these are really like some of the low-hanging fruit that we think these users would really want. But really the next things that we really think we have some gaps is like the, whenever in SSMS you right-click and do properties, and you get that properties window and editing properties, that's something that's just everybody needs. It's kind of, so that's really close on our short-term roadmap. SQL Agent is one that I'm really trying to get into the next couple months of people doing. CMS, the multi-connection query support, and you can see. So this is really what we're doing, and really what we're trying to say is who are the users who are most likely to want to use this tool? Yeah?
What's the execution plan?
Execution plan is in there now. So you have estimated execution plan. And this morning I was doing actual execution plan. So that's, I have the PR out right now. The pull request is being reviewed. We're a little tight for December because we want that on the 19th. So I'm not going to be able to do a nice UX for it. So what you'll get for December is there'll be a command palette. That's the little thing that pops with commands. And excuse me, there'll be an entry there that says, give me actual plan. So you will have that. But right now you still get the little button for estimated. And then in January we'll have a better improved UX around that. Now, there's a whole bunch of execution plan stuff that SSMS does with the execution plan compare and then the QDS and all that stuff. And it might be a little bit of time before we get all that. But at least actual and estimated, you should have the beginning. You have estimate now, you'll have a basic actual in a week or so, and then we'll have an improved one in January. So that's already there. So anyway, this is this. Can you go to the next one? Okay, so this is another way I try to think about how we're doing and what we're doing. So we put things in different buckets of kind of where the work goes. So some of it is just the core stuff. So we have all these fundamentals we do. This is just whenever we ship any product at Microsoft, there's all these exit criteria we have to meet in order to ship a product. So it's, do we meet privacy requirements? Is it localized? Is it accessible? Is it blah, 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 blah? So that stuff we're going to do. Complete all the core scenarios. So don't put new stuff in until you finish the stuff we've already done. That's kind of one of the key principles I like to drive. Extensibility, we have a whole bunch of stuff here. I won't go over all of it. These aren't committed here. Shell, the command dashboard, SQL Agent Profiler. Can you go to the next one? Next one? Okay, cool. So anyway, the call to action here is you go download today, try it out, join the community, give us feedback, let us know what you think of the tool, and so on. So any questions on any of that? Yeah. The roadmap, we're going to, so what we want to do is monthly releases. So we're going to do one in December, we have January, but in terms of what features go in which release, we haven't committed to. Yeah, it'll be monthly. And so what we'll try to get into is something similar to what VS Code does. So in the first week or so of each month, we'll have a new release out. And then we're going to GA around April, I think April through June is what we're targeting now. It's based on quality. We don't have a commitment, but usually we like to align things like GA with big events. And so we're looking, May is probably our next big conference. So that's kind of our schedule. Anything else? So any questions there? I think that's all we have. And I mean, I can go into more details, but I think that's probably enough. Yes.
Any more questions?
We have to drive back to Seattle, so I think we're going to split out once we're done. So if you have any questions.
Are you in charge of the team for doing entity framework, database first,
No, that's all the .NET Core. Yeah, the .NET team owns all that stuff. No, that's a different team that owns all that stuff. Yeah, cool. Go ahead.
Studio has diagramming tools.
Oh yeah. So that's one that we probably won't. Actually, we are not on our short-term roadmap because it's a very big feature, and it's something we think is a nice gap that partners can fill, external partners. So there's other companies that have very good diagramming tools, and so it's such a big thing, and that it takes us kind of away. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, sure. So. It's not that I can't say we're not doing it, but I'm going to say in the next 6 months, which is really the planning phase, where we do call them semesters, and so we start our next semester in January, and in that semester we don't have diagramming. But if you push hard enough, it's possible we'll do it. Yeah, great.
I think that the statement around Management Studio, diagramming in Management Studio, was that we're backing away and not developing that tool. I mean, Visio
Yeah.
wants kind of a tool.
Yeah, the diagramming tools in SSMS is this old code base. So if you remember VSTS, which had this thing called Team Data, that was this thing internally. It's called VDT. It was a Visual Data Tools, and that's this old legacy C++ code base that drives like the table designer and all the diagramming. And so that code base is really, nobody understands it. It's very complicated. We don't fix any bugs there or anything. And so it's probably, that won't go forward. That's going to stay what it is. Anyway, sorry. Yeah.
Sorry if you mentioned this and I missed it. We had some production issues.
Okay.
So all of this is up on GitHub. Is there a way for people in the community to contribute and help out with it?
Yeah, so all the code is on GitHub. You can go there. You can submit pull requests. The core of our logic is all this C# .NET Core code, and that's all MIT. So you go there. That's called SQL Tools Service. And so if you're doing like data operations, that's probably where that code would go. If you're talking about the UI stuff, that's the SQL Ops Studio project. So that's all TypeScript and HTML and that there. So that one we currently have what's called a source EULA. And so I don't make the names, I don't make the licenses, but the license is a source EULA, and this is just, there's logistics around, we weren't able to do MIT for that code base, but we can take contributions, you can use it, download it, build it, use it for your own use, but there's restrictions on redistributing the code for the GUI. The backend, which is where all the database logic is, it's MIT, you can do whatever you want with that, but definitely, yeah. And if you don't like the license, there's an issue there. I think it's our #1 issue where everybody says this license sucks, but go ahead and upvote it, and that's fine. But anyway. All right, so, okay. So that's it. Yeah.
So can you send me the slide deck and I'll put it on our website? Can you do that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
Definitely. Cool.
So we'll get it up, as soon as I get it, I'll get it on our website along with fixing the SQL Server
Cool.
12 thing.
Great. Thanks.
So let's
Cool.
take a 10, yeah.
Cool. Thank you.